The radio crackled with gunfire and screaming. Viking element is compromised. Say again, we are compromised. Taking heavy fire from all directions. 2 men down. Request immediate support. The voice belonged to Senior Chief Harwell, and for the first time since Chief Petty Officer Marisol Vega Castillo had met him 6 hours ago, he sounded afraid. She sat alone in the combat craft, anchored in a shallow cove 200 meters off the Philippine coast, exactly where she had been ordered to stay. The jungle ahead of her was a wall of black and green, impenetrable in the pre-dawn darkness. 3 kilometers inland, men were dying. Men who had looked at her like she was furniture when she dropped them at the insertion point. Before we continue, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. Maybe you know someone who was underestimated until the moment they were needed most. 6 hours earlier, she had watched Senior Chief Harwell step off her boat onto the narrow beach without a single glance back. His team followed in silent procession, 8 operators loaded with enough firepower to start a small war. She had ferried dozens of teams like this one. SEAL elements moving into hostile territory under cover of darkness, while she waited with the engine idling, ready to extract them when the mission was complete. That was her job. Special Warfare Combatant Craft Crewman. The taxi driver, as Harwell had called her when they first met at the mission brief. She remembered his eyes passing over her like she was part of the equipment. "You just keep the boat warm, sweetheart," he had said. "We will call when we need a ride home." The younger operator, Petty Officer Makoa, had lingered at the edge of the boat while the others moved toward the treeline. He was checking his gear one last time, hands moving with the nervous energy of someone on his first real deployment. She noticed he had forgotten to fill his secondary canteen. "Makoa," she had said quietly. He turned, surprised that she knew his name. She reached in her own pack and pulled out her backup water supply. 2 liters she had planned to use if extraction got delayed. "Take this," she said. "Jungle will drain you faster than you think." He hesitated, pride and need fighting across his young face. Then he took it. "Thanks, Chief." He paused, glancing toward where Harwell had disappeared into the vegetation. "Sorry about the Senior Chief. He is not usually that bad." She had said nothing to that. There was nothing to say. Men like Harwell had been dismissing her for 15 years. She had stopped expecting anything different. Now, those same men were trapped 3 kilometers away, their voices cutting through static and chaos on the radio frequency. She heard the sharp crack of rifles, the deeper thump of grenades, the sounds that haunted her sleep from a dozen deployments she was never supposed to talk about. "Viking element, say again your position," she transmitted. "Viking element, respond." More gunfire. Then Harwell again, his voice tighter now. "We're falling back to grid reference 774. Logging camp. Going to try to establish defensive perimeter. Osei is down. Washington is hit. We need extract now." She checked her charts. Grid reference 774 was the abandoned logging camp they had identified in the mission planning. It was defensible if you had enough ammunition and enough men. From the sound of the radio traffic, they had neither. "Viking element, extraction is not possible at your current position," she said. "Terrain does not allow water approach. Nearest viable extract point is the original insertion beach." Silence. Then a bitter laugh from Harwell. "Copy that. We will just walk 3 clicks through the ambush that is currently trying to kill us." She could hear it in his voice. The resignation, the mathematics of combat that every operator learned to calculate in their heads. Distance, ammunition, casualties, odds of survival. His math was coming up short. She looked down at the case beside her seat. Black polymer, scratched and worn from years of use. Inside it was something she had not touched in 3 years. Something she had promised herself she would never touch again. Her father had carried one just like it. Marine Scout Sniper, 1st Battalion, deployed to Fallujah in 2004. He had written her letters about the weight of it, the responsibility it represented. "Every round is a choice, Mija," he had written. "You do not take the shot unless you are certain. And once you take it, you carry it forever." He had been killed 2 weeks after writing those words. She was 16 years old. She keyed the radio again. "Viking element, what is the enemy strength?" "Unknown. Harwell was breathing hard now, and she could hear others moving behind him. At least 20, maybe more. They knew we were coming. This was a setup. The Collector. She had read the intelligence briefings. A regional warlord who had turned ambushing American Special Operations teams into an art form. 3 successful attacks in 2 years. He studied their tactics, learned their patterns, and struck when they were most vulnerable. The teams he caught were never seen again, but their equipment showed up on black markets across Southeast Asia. She opened the case. The M40A6 lay inside. Nestled in foam, she had cut herself years ago. The rifle had been her father's, then hers, modified and upgraded over years of service. She had officially never performed. The Marine Corps had trained her to use it when she was 19. The operations she had conducted with it between 20 and 31 had never appeared in any official record. La Sombra. That was what they had called her in Afghanistan. The Shadow. 47 confirmed kills across 3 deployments, all attributed to other shooters in the official reports. She had been a ghost, a rumor, a name whispered by enemies who had learned to fear the dark. Then a child had stepped into her crosshairs at the wrong moment, and everything had ended. She had transferred to the Navy, taken a support role, buried herself in a job where no one would ever ask her to take a shot again. 3 years of ferrying operators to and from missions, watching them walk into danger while she waited with the boat. But now those men were dying, and she was the only one who could reach them. She lifted the rifle from its case. The weight was familiar in her hands, like greeting an old friend she had tried to forget. She checked the action, loaded a magazine, and felt something shift inside her chest. A door she had closed was opening again. Her father's dog tags hung around her neck, warm against her skin. She touched them once, briefly. "Forgive me, Papa," she whispered. One more time. She secured the boat, grabbed her pack, and slipped over the side into the warm water. The jungle waited ahead, dark and patient. Somewhere in its depths, 8 men were fighting for their lives against an enemy who thought they had already won. They did not know she was coming. Nobody ever did. The jungle swallowed her whole within 30 seconds of leaving the water. Vegetation pressed against her from every direction, vines grabbing at her arms and legs like fingers trying to pull her back. The air was thick enough to chew, heavy with moisture and the rotting sweetness of decaying plants. She moved through it the way her instructors had taught her 15 years ago. Low and steady, each footstep placed with deliberate care, weight distributed to avoid snapping branches or rustling leaves. Most people crashed through terrain like this. They fought against it, tried to force their way through, and announced their presence to anyone listening within 100 meters. She had learned long ago that the jungle was not an enemy to be conquered. It was a system to be understood. Move with it, not against it. Become part of its rhythm, and it would hide you from everything. 3 kilometers. In open terrain, she could cover that distance in under 20 minutes at a tactical pace. Here, pushing through triple canopy with full gear and a rifle, it would take at least an hour. Maybe longer if she encountered enemy elements along the way. The radio traffic had gone quiet 7 minutes ago. Either the SEALs had reached the logging camp and were conserving battery, or they were all dead. She refused to consider the second option. She paused at a small creek, taking a knee in the shallow water to check her bearing. The GPS unit on her wrist showed her position relative to grid reference 774, 2.6 kilometers northeast. She was making good time, but the sounds of gunfire had faded to nothing, and the silence was worse than the chaos had been. A branch snapped somewhere to her left. She froze, rifle coming up in a single fluid motion. The scope was useless in this darkness, but the iron sights would work fine at close range. She controlled her breathing, slowing her heart rate the way she had trained herself to do in situations exactly like this one. Fear was a chemical reaction. It could be managed. It could be used. 30 seconds passed. A minute. Then a shape moved through the undergrowth ahead of her. Low to the ground for legs, a snout sniffing at the air. Wild pig. The jungle was full of them. It caught her scent, squealed in alarm, and crashed away through the vegetation. She exhaled slowly and continued moving. The first body appeared 20 minutes later. He was Filipino, dressed in mismatched military surplus gear, an egg-pattern rifle still clutched in his hands. The wound in his chest told her everything she needed to know. Clean entry, center mass. One of the SEALs had put him down during the initial contact. She checked his equipment quickly, professionally. 2 extra magazines, a handheld radio tuned to a frequency she memorized, a cheap smartphone with a cracked screen. She took the magazines and left the rest. 200 meters further, she found a second body. Then a third. The SEALs had been fighting a running retreat, dropping enemies as they fell back toward the logging camp. But the blood trails told a different story too. American blood mixed with Filipino. The team had been paying for every meter of ground they gained. She found where the ambush had been initiated by reading the scene like a book. The kill zone was a natural choke point where the trail narrowed between 2 rock formations. Perfect terrain for an L-shaped ambush. The enemy had waited until the entire team was in the pocket, then opened fire from 2 directions simultaneously. Classic tactics, well executed. The collector had done his homework. Shell casings littered the ground. She counted them automatically, her mind calculating rates of fire and ammunition expenditure. The SEALs had burned through a lot of rounds getting out of this trap. They would be running low by now. The blood trail leading away from the ambush site was heavier than it should have been. Multiple wounded. She thought of Washington, the communicator who had nodded politely to her during the mission brief. Thought of Lieutenant Commander Osei, who had actually thanked her for the smooth insertion. Good men. Men who deserved better than dying in a jungle because someone had sold them out. She followed the trail. The terrain rose gradually as she moved inland, the jungle floor giving way to rocky outcroppings and steeper grades. She could hear water somewhere nearby, a stream cutting through the hills. The logging camp was built on a plateau overlooking that stream, according to the maps. Defensible high ground with clear sight lines in 3 directions. If the SEALs had made it there, they had a chance. A small one, but a chance. Gunfire erupted ahead of her. Short, controlled bursts answered by the longer automatic fire of egg-pattern rifles. The SEALs were still fighting, still alive. She increased her pace, caution giving way to urgency. The element of surprise was her only real advantage. If she could reach a position overlooking the camp before the enemy knew she was in the area, she could change the mathematics of this fight. One shooter in the right position could do more damage than a dozen men in the wrong one. The jungle began to thin as she climbed higher. Patches of sky appeared through the canopy, stars fading toward gray as dawn approached. She checked her watch. 05:45. She had been moving for almost an hour. The sun would be up in 30 minutes, and with it, she would lose the darkness that was keeping her hidden. She heard voices ahead. Filipino dialect, 2 men moving parallel to her position, maybe 50 meters to the east. Flanking element trying to get around behind the SEALs. She dropped to the ground and let them pass, close enough to hear their breathing, close enough to smell the cigarette smoke clinging to their clothes. They never knew she was there. When they had moved on, she rose and continued climbing. The plateau was close now. She could see the outline of abandoned structures through the trees, corrugated metal roofs rusting in the tropical air. The logging company had pulled out years ago, leaving behind equipment and buildings that were slowly being reclaimed by the jungle. She found a ridge. It rose above the logging camp like a natural watchtower, rocky and bare at its peak, but covered with vegetation on its lower slopes. From the top, she would have a clear view of the entire area. Every approach, every position, every target. She began to climb. Halfway up, she paused to catch her breath and looked down at the camp below. She could see them now. The SEALs had established a perimeter around what looked like a maintenance building, using rusted machinery and fallen logs as cover. She counted heads. 6 men moving, 2 down and still. That meant 2 dead or 2 wounded too badly to fight. Harwell was visible near the center of the position, directing fire toward the tree-line. Beyond the perimeter, in the jungle that surrounded the camp, she could see movement. shapes flitting between trees, muzzle flashes winking in the pre-dawn gray. The enemy was probing, testing, looking for weak points. They were not in a hurry. They knew they had the Americans trapped. She reached the top of the ridge and settled into a prone position behind a fallen tree. The M40 came up smooth and steady, the scope finding targets with the ease of long practice. She began to count. 12 hostiles visible, probably more in the jungle she could not see. 8 rounds in her magazine, 40 more in her pack. The SEALs had maybe 200 rounds between them, based on what she had seen at the ambush site. The math was bad, but she had worked with worse. She placed her crosshairs on the chest of a man, crouched behind a tree stump 200 meters below. He was directing others with hand signals, clearly some kind of leader. Take out the leadership first. That was always the rule. Her finger moved to the trigger. She exhaled half a breath and held it. The first shot was always the hardest, not because of the mechanics. Those were burned into her muscle memory so deeply she could make the shot in her sleep. The hardest part was the moment before. The last second of stillness when the target was still alive, still breathing, still someone with a name and a family and a future. Then the trigger broke, and none of that mattered anymore. She fired. The man behind the tree stump dropped without a sound. His hand was still raised in a signal that would never be completed. The crack of the rifle echoed across the valley, and for a single frozen moment, everything stopped. The enemy fighters looked around in confusion. The SEALs in the camp below paused their firing. Everyone was trying to understand what had just happened. She did not give them time to figure it out. Her second shot took a fighter who had stepped out from behind a rusted bulldozer, probably trying to see where the first round had come from. He spun and fell. Her third caught a man running between positions, dropping him mid-stride. By the time she chambered her fourth round, the enemy had realized they were being hunted from above. Chaos erupted in the jungle below. Men scrambled for cover, shouting to each other in panicked Filipino. Some fired blindly toward the ridge, their rounds snapping through vegetation 20 meters to her left. They had no idea where she was. They were shooting at ghosts. She repositioned 10 meters to her right, sliding through the undergrowth with practiced efficiency. Never fire more than 3 rounds from the same position. That was the rule. Stay mobile, stay invisible, stay alive. From her new vantage point, she could see 2 fighters trying to set up a machine gun behind a fallen log. If they got that weapon operational, they could suppress the SEAL position and allow the rest of their force to advance. She put her crosshairs on the man, feeding the ammunition belt, and squeezed the trigger. He collapsed over the weapon. His partner looked up in horror, and her next round ended his horror permanently. 5 shots, 5 kills, 3 rounds left in the magazine. Down in the camp, she could see the SEALs reacting to the changed situation. Harwell was shouting orders, directing his men to concentrate fire on the enemies who were now exposed and panicking. They did not know who was helping them, but they were smart enough to exploit the advantage. A voice crackled over the radio frequency she had taken from the dead fighter. Someone was speaking rapidly in Tagalog, the words tumbling over each other in fear and confusion. She caught fragments. Sniper. Ridge. Cannot see. How many? Then another voice cut through. Calm. Cold. Controlled. Everyone stop. Hold positions. Do not move until we locate the shooter. The panic in the other voices subsided. Discipline reasserted itself. Whoever had just spoken, the others feared him more than they feared her. That had to be a commander. Maybe the collector himself. She scanned the tree line, looking for the source of that voice. A man who could control terrified fighters with a few words was dangerous. A man like that would not stay hidden for long. He would want to see the battlefield, assess the threat, make decisions. He would expose himself eventually. She waited. The jungle had gone quiet. The enemy fighters had melted into cover, invisible among the vegetation. The SEALs held their fire, conserving ammunition, watching for movement. It was a standoff, and in a standoff, time favored the force with greater numbers. She used the pause to reload, swapping her partial magazine for a fresh one. 8 rounds. She had 40 more in her pack, but at the rate this fight was developing, she would need every single one. Movement in the camp caught her attention. One of the SEALs was low-crawling toward a wounded man lying near the perimeter. She recognized the build and movement pattern. Makoa, the young operator she had given her water to 6 hours ago. He was risking his life to reach a fallen teammate. The wounded man was Washington. She could see him now, clutching his side, trying to wave Makoa back. But the young SEAL kept coming, determination overriding common sense. She shifted her scope to cover his approach, watching for any enemy who might take advantage of his exposed position. A fighter rose from behind a pile of debris 50 meters from Makoa, rifle coming up to aim. She fired before he could complete the motion. The round took him in the shoulder, spinning him sideways. Not a kill shot, but enough to put him down and make the others think twice. Makoa reached Washington and began dragging him back toward the main position. Harwell and another SEAL provided covering fire. She added her own, placing rounds near any position that showed movement, keeping heads down while the rescue was completed. Washington was pulled behind the rusted machinery. She saw hospital man Driscoll, the combat medic, immediately begin working on him. His vest was dark with blood. Whatever had hit him badly. The radio crackled again. The calm voice was back. That's shooting. The pattern. I know this pattern. A pause. She felt something cold move through her chest. Afghanistan. Helmand Province. 2019. There was a sniper who shot like this. The Americans said she did not exist. But my brother was in Helmand. He told me about her before he died. He called her La Sombra. Silence on the frequency. She could almost feel the other fighters listening, waiting. The shadow, the voice continued. They said she was a myth. A story to frighten us. But my brother saw what she did to his unit. 14 men in one night. She never missed. Her finger had frozen on the trigger. She had not heard that name spoken aloud in 3 years. Had tried to bury it so deep that even she would forget it existed. Find her, the voice commanded. Find La Sombra. I want her alive. She will be the greatest trophy I have ever collected. The jungle exploded with movement. Fighters began advancing toward the ridge from 3 directions, no longer trying to hide, accepting casualties in exchange for speed. They were coming for her now, all of them. She had wanted to stay hidden, had wanted to be no one, just a boat driver who happened to carry a rifle. But the past had found her again, the way it always did. She chambered a fresh round and started picking targets. If they wanted La Sombra, she would show them exactly who she was. She dropped the first 2 before they made it 10 meters from their cover. The third took a round through the hip and went down screaming, his cries echoing through the jungle like a wounded animal. The sound would shake the others, make them hesitate, make them wonder if the advance was worth the cost. But they kept coming. The collector had his men well trained. They moved in short rushes, never more than 3 seconds of exposure at a time, using every scrap of cover the terrain offered. For every one she dropped, 2 more appeared from different angles. They were trying to triangulate her position, and they were getting closer with every passing minute. She fired, repositioned, fired again. The rhythm of combat settled into her bones like an old familiar song. Breathe, aim, squeeze, move, repeat. Her world narrowed to the scope, the trigger, and the space between heartbeats where everything became perfectly still. Down in the camp, the SEALs had realized something had changed. The enemy pressure on their perimeter had shifted, most of the fighters now focused on the ridge instead of the maintenance building. Harwell was smart enough to take advantage. She heard the sharp crack of their rifles as they picked off enemies whose attention had wandered. The radio she had taken crackled with constant chatter now. Coordinates, sightings, casualty reports. The collector was directing his forces like pieces on a chessboard, patient and methodical despite the losses he was taking. She counted at least 8 dead since the assault on her position began, but there were always more. Always more. A burst of automatic fire tore through the vegetation to her right, close enough that she felt bark splinters pepper her cheek. Someone had gotten a fix on her muzzle flash. She rolled left, scrambling down a rocky outcropping to a secondary position she had identified earlier. Her shoulder slammed against a tree root, and pain flared through her arm, but she kept moving. Pain was information. It told her she was still alive. She came up in a shallow depression between two boulders, rifle already scanning for targets. 3 fighters were advancing up the slope 60 meters below, moving in a wedge formation. Professional spacing. Coordinated movement. These were not local militia. These were trained soldiers. She took the point man first, then shifted to the left flanker before he could react. The third dove behind a rock, and she waited. Patience was a weapon too. Patience had kept her alive through situations far worse than this. The fighter broke from cover after 12 seconds, trying to sprint to a better position. Her round caught him in the chest before he completed his second step. 11 confirmed kills since the assault began. Her magazine was empty. She reloaded by feel, eyes never leaving the scope, and continued scanning. The radio traffic had changed. The collector was speaking again, his voice carrying that same unsettling calm. She is alone. One shooter. The ridge is not large. Push from all sides. Overwhelm her position. I want her alive, but if you must kill her, I will accept the body. She is worth more than all of you combined, he added. Do not fail me. A voice responded from the camp frequency. She almost did not recognize it at first. Harwell. Viking element to unknown friendly, he said. We can see movement on 3 sides of your position. You are about to be overrun. Recommend you fall back to our perimeter. She keyed her radio for the first time since entering the jungle. Negative. If I move, they will have a clear approach to your position. Hold what you have. A long pause. Then Harwell again, his voice different now. Confused. Who is this? She did not answer. There would be time for explanations later, assuming they survived long enough to have them. Right now, every second she spent talking was a second she was not shooting. A fighter appeared on her left flank, closer than any of the others had gotten. He was good, using the terrain perfectly, and she only saw him because the rising sun caught the barrel of his rifle. She swung the M40 and fired in one motion, a snapshot that would have been impossible for most shooters. The round took him in the throat. He fell backward and did not move. Her position was compromised now. Too many angles, too many approaches, not enough ammunition. She needed to move, but every direction led toward enemies who were waiting for exactly that. Down in the camp, she heard Washington laugh. The sound was weak, pained, but unmistakably a laugh. We got a guardian angel, he said, loud enough for the others to hear. Someone up there likes us. Makoa responded, his voice carrying the adrenaline edge of a man who had just cheated death. Guardian angel with a 50 cal, bro. You see those shots? Not 50 cal, Harwell said quietly. That is an M40. Precision rifle. Whoever is up, there's a trained sniper. She could almost hear the gears turning in his head. A sniper. On a mission where no sniper had been assigned. Appearing from nowhere in the middle of an ambush that should have killed them all. The radio crackled again. Harwell's voice, harder now, demanding. Unknown friendly, identify yourself. Who are you? She sighted on a fighter, trying to crawl through tall grass toward her position. Her round kicked up dirt 6 inches from his head, and he scrambled backward in panic. Stay down and stay quiet, she said into the radio. I am working. Another pause, then a different voice. Washington, his words slurred with pain, but tinged with something like wonder. Senior Chief. That voice. I know that voice. Harwell did not respond immediately. She could imagine him reviewing every interaction from the mission brief, every face, every name. Try to match the voice on the radio with someone he had dismissed and forgotten. She did not have time to help him figure it out. 3 more fighters had appeared on the eastern slope, and they were moving fast. She put her eye to the scope and went back to work. The eastern slope was her blind spot, and they knew it. She caught the first fighter as he crested a rocky ledge, her round punching through his chest before he could bring his weapon to bear. The second dropped behind the same ledge, using his dead companion as cover. Smart, patient, willing to wait her out. But there was a third she had not seen. He came from below, climbing through a drainage channel that cut through the ridge like a scar. She heard the scrape of boot on stone a half-second before he appeared, rising from the shadows with a machete in one hand and murder in his eyes. No time to swing the rifle. No time to think. She rolled sideways as the blade came down, feeling it whisper past her ear close enough to clip a strand of hair. Her hand found the knife on her belt, and then she was inside his reach, too close for him to use the machete effectively. The jungle training from 15 years ago took over. Her blade found the soft space beneath his ribs, angled upward, and she felt the resistance give way as steel met vital organs. He looked at her with something like surprise. Young, maybe 20, a boy playing soldier in a game he did not understand. His mouth opened to say something, but only blood came out. She held him as he fell, lowering him to the ground with a gentleness that contradicted what she had just done. His eyes went empty, and she was alone again. She wiped the blade on his shirt and sheathed it, her hands steadier than they had any right to be. The kill had been necessary, clean, professional, but she could still feel the warmth of his blood on her fingers, and somewhere deep in her chest, something cracked. This was why she had stopped. This was why she had buried herself in a support role and promised herself she would never take another life. Not because she could not do it, because she could do it too easily, because every kill carved away another piece of whatever made her human, and she was terrified of what would be left when all the pieces were gone. A sound escaped her throat. Not quite a sob, not quite a laugh. Something in between. The fighter behind the ledge was still there, still waiting. She could hear him breathing, hear him try to work up the courage to make his move. She raised the M40 and put a round through the rock ledge itself, the heavy bullet spalling fragments into the space behind it. A cry of pain told her at least one fragment had found its target. She did not wait to confirm a kill. More were coming. There were always more. The memory came unbidden, the way it always did when she killed up close. Helmand Province, 2019. A compound on the outskirts of a village whose name she had never learned. She had been providing overwatch for a Marine patrol, positioned on a rooftop 300 meters away. Her scope had found a fighter moving through a doorway, rifle raised toward the Marines below. She had taken a shot. The fighter fell, and behind him, stepping through the same doorway at exactly the wrong moment, a child. A girl, maybe 8 years old, wearing a blue dress that was too big for her. The round had already passed through the fighter. It had already begun to tumble. She had watched through the scope as the girl crumpled. The after-action report said the child had been killed by enemy fire. The official record showed no sniper involvement in the incident. Her commanding officer had pulled her aside and told her it was not her fault that these things happened in war, that she had saved Marine lives with that shot. None of that mattered. She had seen the blue dress in her nightmares every night for 3 years. She pressed her forehead against the cool stock of the rifle and forced herself to breathe. The past was the past. The dead were dead. The men in the camp below were still alive, and they needed her to stay focused. A burst of gunfire from the camp jerked her back to the present. The enemy assault on her position had created an opening, and some of the collector's men were using it to press the SEAL perimeter. She shifted her scope and found a fighter advancing on Makoa's position from an angle the young operator could not see. Her shot dropped him 3 meters from the SEAL line. Makoa spun at the sound of the body falling, saw the dead man, looked up toward the ridge. She could not see his expression from this distance, but she imagined his confusion, his wonder. The radio in her pocket crackled. Unknown friendly. This is Viking Element Actual. Harwell's voice was different now. The condescension was gone, replaced by something that sounded almost like respect. I do not know who you are or why you are here, but we owe you our lives. If you can hear me, we're prepared to support your exfil from the ridge. Give me a direction and we will lay down covering fire. She keyed the radio. Negative, Viking. Stay in position. If you break cover, you die. The voice again, Washington this time, weaker than before, but insistent. Senior Chief, I'm telling you. I know that voice. The brief. The insertion. She was on the boat. Silence. She could picture Harwell's face as the pieces finally clicked into place. The boat driver. The woman he had dismissed with a wave of his hand and a condescending smile. The sweetheart he had told to keep the engine warm. The radio crackled once more. Chief Vega Castillo? Harwell said her name like it was a foreign word he had never learned to pronounce. Is it you? She sighted on another fighter trying to flank the camp. Fired. Watch him fall. Stay down and stay quiet, she said again. I'm getting you out of here. She ejected the spent magazine and reached for a fresh one. 18 rounds left. Enemies on 3 sides. Dawn breaking over the jungle canopy. The mathematics had not improved, but mathematics had never stopped her before. Forgive me, Papa, she whispered to the dog tags against her chest. One more time. The collector's voice cut through the radio chatter like a blade through silk. Vega Castillo. So that is the name she uses now. She froze, finger hovering above the trigger. He had heard the SEAL transmission. He knew who she was. Not just La Sombra, the myth. Her actual name. I have been hunting you for 6 years, he continued. Since Helmand. Since you killed my brother and 23 of his men in a single week. The elders said you were a demon. A spirit that could not be killed. But I knew better. I knew you were just a woman with a rifle and a talent for death. She forced herself to focus on the scope, scanning for targets, but his words burrowed into her mind like parasites. My brother spoke of you before he died. Did you know that? He survived 3 days after your bullet tore through his lung. 3 days of drowning in his own blood, whispering about the shadow on the ridge. The woman who never missed. Her hands were trembling now. She pressed them harder against the rifle, willing them to still. I made a promise to him, the collector said. I told him I would find you. I would make you understand what it means to watch everything you care about bleed out in front of you. And now here you are, delivered to me like a gift. She keyed her radio. Your brother was a soldier. He knew the risks. So do you? A soft laugh came through the static. Perhaps. But those SEALs you are protecting, they did not choose to be part of our story. Surrender yourself, and I will let them walk out of this jungle. You have my word. Your word means nothing. Another laugh. Then we will do this the hard way. I have 40 men converging on your position. 40 men who know that the one who brings me La Sombra will be rewarded beyond their dreams. How many bullets do you have left, I wonder? She did not answer. He already knew the math was against her. In the camp below, she could hear the SEALs reacting to the exchange. Harwell was on the radio, his voice tight with the effort of processing what he had just learned. Vega Castillo, what is he talking about? Who are you? She kept her eye on the scope. Now is not the time, Senior Chief. The hell it is not. He says you killed 23 men in a week. He says you have been hunted for 6 years. What are you not telling us? Washington's voice cut in, weaker than before, but carrying a note of recognition. Senior Chief, I heard rumors back in Coronado, years ago, about a Marine sniper the Corps tried to bury. A woman who racked up more kills in 3 deployments than most units see in a decade. They called her the Shadow. That is a myth, Harwell said. A story instructors tell to scare recruits. She is not a myth, Washington replied. She is on that ridge. Silence on the frequency. She could feel their eyes on her position 600 meters below, seeing her differently now. Not the boat driver. Not the sweetheart keeping the engine warm. Something else entirely. The collector spoke again. You see, La Sombra, they did not even know who you were. The people you were dying to protect had already forgotten you existed. Is that loyalty really worth your life? She thought about his question. Thought about the years she had spent hiding in plain sight, ferrying operators to missions she would never be part of, watching them walk into danger while she waited with the boat. She had convinced herself it was penance. Atonement for the lives she had taken and the ones she had accidentally destroyed. But maybe it had just been fear. Fear of becoming the Shadow again. Fear of what she was capable of when she stopped pretending to be ordinary. The enemy was moving. She could see them through the scope, dozens of figures filtering through the jungle from every direction. The collector was not bluffing. He had committed everything to this assault. 40 men against 1 woman on a ridge and 6 wounded SEALs in a logging camp. She did the math one more time. 18 rounds, 40 targets, 3 hours until the extraction window opened. Even if she made every shot count, The numbers did not work. But numbers had never told the whole story. She keyed the radio one final time. Viking element, listen carefully. In approximately 2 minutes, every hostile in this valley is going to assault my position. When that happens, you will have a window. Move your wounded to the northwest corner of the camp. There's a drainage culvert that leads toward the river. Follow it until you reach the extraction point. Harwell responded immediately. Negative. We are not leaving you behind. You do not have a choice. She chambered around, the sound crisp and final in the morning air. I'm going to buy you time. Use it. Vega Castillo, wait. His voice cracked on her name. We can fight our way to your position. Reinforce the ridge. Make a stand together. She almost smiled. 6 hours ago, he would not have let her carry his coffee. Now he was offering to die beside her. Senior Chief, she said quietly, you have wounded men who need a hospital and a team that needs its leader. Get them home. That is an order. You do not outrank me. No, she agreed. But I am the one with the rifle, and I am the one who decides how this ends. Below, the collector's forces began their final advance. 40 men moving through the jungle like a wave, converging on the ridge from every direction. She could hear them now, boots crashing through undergrowth, voices calling to each other in anticipation of victory. She settled into her position, controlled her breathing, and placed her crosshairs on the closest target. La Sombra had been buried for 3 years. But some shadows never really die. They just wait for the darkness to call them home. The first wave hit the ridge like a storm breaking against rocks. She fired until her magazine ran dry, dropped 3 men in the space of 8 seconds, then rolled to her secondary position as bullets shredded the vegetation where she had been lying. Dirt and leaves erupted around her. Bark exploded from tree trunks. The air itself seemed to crack and splinter with the volume of incoming fire. She reloaded on the move, her hands working from muscle memory while her eyes scanned for the next threat. A fighter appeared on her left, too close, rifle swinging toward her. She shot him through the face at a distance of 4 meters. Another came from behind a boulder, and she put 2 rounds into his chest before he could fire. 10 rounds left. 37 enemies remaining. The mathematics of death, calculated in fractions of seconds between heartbeats. She fell back toward the ridge's peak, using every fold in the terrain, every shadow, every scrap of cover the jungle offered. They were closing in from all sides now, their initial caution abandoned in the frenzy of the hunt. The collector wanted her alive, but his men wanted her dead. In the chaos of combat, dead was easier. A burst of fire caught her across the left arm, 3 rounds stitching a line of fire from elbow to shoulder. She stumbled, caught herself against a tree, kept moving. The pain was distant, muffled by adrenaline and training. She would deal with it later. If there was a later. The radio crackled against her hip. Vega Castillo, we are moving to the drainage culvert. Harwell's voice was strained, reluctant. Washington is stable enough to transport. We will make the extraction point. Copy, she managed between breaths. Do not stop. Do not look back. A pause. Then his voice again, softer now. Why are you doing this? You do not even know us. She dropped behind a fallen log, sighted on a fighter, trying to flank her position, and fired. He went down, clutching his stomach. 9 rounds. Because someone has to, she said. That is not an answer. She thought about it for a moment, the question hanging in the air between gunshots. Why was she doing this? She had spent 3 years running from who she was, hiding from the shadow that had consumed her life. She could have stayed with the boat, could have called for backup and waited for someone else to handle the problem. No one would have blamed her. No one would have known. But she would have known. And somewhere in the jungle, 8 men would have died because she was too afraid to be who she was born to be. My father was a Marine, she said finally. Scout sniper. Fallujah, 2004. He used to write me letters about what it meant to wear the uniform, about duty and sacrifice and the weight of the rifle in your hands. She paused to fire twice more. 2 targets down, 7 rounds remaining. He told me that courage was not about being unafraid. It was about being terrified and doing the right thing anyway. He died holding a position so his squad could evacuate wounded. They found him with an empty rifle and a smile on his face. Harwell was silent. She could hear movement on his end, the sounds of men struggling through dense vegetation with wounded teammates. I spent 3 years trying to forget what he taught me, she continued. Trying to be someone smaller, someone safe. But you cannot run from who you are, Senior Chief. Eventually, the world calls you back. A grenade exploded 15 meters to her right, close enough that the concussion rattled her teeth and left her ears ringing. She rolled away from the blast zone, came up firing, and dropped the man who had thrown it. 6 rounds. Vega Castillo. Washington's voice now, weak but warm. Your father would be proud of you. Something cracked in her chest. Not pain. Something deeper. Something that had been frozen for a very long time. Thank you, she whispered. The assault was faltering. She had killed or wounded at least 15 men in the past 10 minutes, and the survivors were losing their appetite for the fight. They had expected an easy kill, a lone woman on a ridge with nowhere to run. Instead, they had found La Sombra, and La Sombra was making them pay for every inch of ground and blood. But she was running out of ammunition, and they knew it. She could hear the collector on the radio, rallying his forces, promising rewards and threatening punishments. The next wave would be the last. They would overwhelm her through sheer numbers, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. She checked her magazine. 6 rounds, plus the 8 in her backup mag, 14 shots between her and death. The jungle had gone quiet, the calm before the final storm. She used the pause to bind her wounded arm with a strip torn from her shirt. The bleeding had slowed, but the limb was weak, trembling with shock and blood loss. She would not be able to shoot much longer, would not be able to run. The dog tags pressed against her chest, warm from her body heat. She pulled them out and looked at them for the first time in years. Her father's name, his blood type, his service number, everything that remained of a man who had given his life so others could live. Like father, like daughter, she murmured. A sound reached her ears, distant at first, then growing closer. The rhythmic thump of helicopter rotors cutting through the morning air. Extraction was still hours away. The sound made no sense. Then Harwell's voice exploded through the radio, desperate and confused. Viking element to any station. We have unknown rotary wing aircraft inbound from the northeast. Multiple contacts. Someone tell me those are friendlies. She lifted her head and looked toward the horizon. 3 black shapes were cutting through the sky, moving fast and low over the jungle canopy. No marking she could see. No identification. The collector's voice came through the radio, and for the first time, she heard something other than cold confidence in his tone. Fear. Pull back, he commanded. All units pull back now. The helicopters banked hard over the valley, and she saw the markings on their sides. Philippine Air Force. Someone had called in the cavalry. But the cavalry was not stopping. The aircraft thundered overhead without slowing, their door gunners scanning the jungle below, but holding fire. They were reconnaissance, not rescue. Searching for something, or someone. The radio crackled with a new voice, crisp and professional. Viking element, this is Razor Flight. Philippine Armed Forces Quick Reaction Unit. We have reports of hostile activity in your area. Confirm your position and status. Harwell responded immediately. Razor Flight, Viking Actual. We are at grid reference 774, logging camp. 6 personnel, 2 wounded critical. We have a friendly asset on the ridge northeast of our position. Single operator, wounded under heavy enemy contact. Copy, Viking. We are vectoring ground forces to your location. ETA, 45 minutes. Can you hold? 45 minutes. She looked down at the 14 rounds in her possession and the jungle full of enemies between her and the camp. 45 minutes might as well be 45 years. The collector's forces had pulled back at the sight of the helicopters, but they had not gone far. She could see them regrouping in the treeline below, their discipline reasserting itself now that the initial panic had passed. The aircraft were reconnaissance only. Not these. The collector would figure that out soon enough, and when he did, the assault would resume. Viking Actual, she transmitted. Do not wait for ground forces. Move to extraction point now, while you have a window. Negative, Harwell replied. We are not leaving without you. She almost laughed. 6 hours ago, he would have left her without a second thought. Now he was willing to risk his entire team to bring her home. War did strange things to people. Senior Chief, listen to me. The enemy has pulled back, but they have not retreated. The moment those helicopters leave the area, they will be back. You need to move your wounded now, while you still can. And what about you? She looked at her wounded arm, the blood-soaked bandage already seeping through. Looked at the 14 rounds that stood between her and death. Looked at the jungle that had been her killing ground and would soon become her grave. I will keep them busy, she said. Buy you time to reach the river. That is suicide. Maybe, but it is my choice to make. The radio was silent for a long moment. She could picture Harwell in the camp below, torn between his training and something deeper. The mathematics of command said to take the window and run. Leave the wounded operator behind. Complete the mission. Survive. But mathematics had never told the whole story. Vega Castillo, he said finally. Marisol, when we get home, I owe you an apology. A real one. For how I treated you. For what I assumed. For all of it. She felt something warm spread through her chest despite the cold that was creeping into her limbs. You can apologize when we are both stateside, Senior Chief. Now move your team. Copy that. Harwell's voice hardened with resolve. Viking element, prepare to move. Makoa, take point. Driscoll, keep Washington stable. We are heading for the river. She watched through her scope as the SEALs began their movement, slipping out of the camp toward the drainage culvert she had identified. They moved well despite their wounds, covering each other, maintaining discipline. Professional to the last. Makoa paused at the edge of the treeline and looked back toward the ridge. She could not see his face, but she imagined his expression. Gratitude. Guilt. The weight of surviving when someone else was staying behind to die. Go, she whispered. Go and do not look back. He disappeared into the jungle, and she was alone. The collector's voice returned to the radio, his composure restored. The helicopters have moved on, La Sombra. My men are reforming. You have perhaps 5 minutes before we resume our assault. She scanned the treeline, counting the shapes moving through the shadows. At least 25 still combat effective. More than enough to overwhelm her position. You could still surrender, he continued. I'm a man of my word. Join my collection willingly, and I will let the SEALs go. Your word means nothing, she said. You already proved that. A soft laugh. Perhaps. But consider your situation. You are wounded. You are alone. You have perhaps a dozen rounds remaining. The mathematics do not favor you. She thought about her father, about the position he had held in Fallujah with an empty rifle and a smile on his face, about the letters he had written and the legacy he had left behind. My father taught me something about mathematics, she said. He taught me that courage is not calculated in numbers. It is measured in the seconds between heartbeats, in the breath you take before you pull the trigger, in the choice you make when running is easier than standing. She chambered around, the sound carrying across the valley like a promise. I'm not running, she said. Come and get me. The jungle erupted with movement. 25 men surging toward the ridge, weapons blazing, voices raised in fury. The final assault had begun. She placed her crosshairs on the closest target, exhaled half a breath, and fired. 13 rounds remaining. 25 enemies. And somewhere below, 6 men fighting their way toward a river that would carry them home. The mathematics had never been worse. But her father had been right. Some things could not be measured in numbers. She stopped counting after the 7th kill. The ridge had become a charnel house, bodies scattered across the slope like broken dolls. She moved through the chaos like a ghost, firing and repositioning, never staying in one place long enough for them to get a fix on her position. The jungle training she had tried to forget was fully awake now, guiding her hands, steadying her breathing, turning her into the weapon she had always been. A fighter burst through the undergrowth to her right. She shot him twice in the chest at point-blank range. Another came from behind, and she spun, dropping him with a single round through the throat. Her wounded arm screamed with every movement, but she pushed the pain down into the dark place where she kept everything else she could not afford to feel. 8 rounds. Maybe 15 enemies still standing. The mathematics were improving, but she was fading. Blood loss and exhaustion were taking their toll, turning her limbs to lead and her vision to fog at the edges. She stumbled over a root and went down hard, the rifle nearly slipping from her grip. A fighter appeared above her, machete raised, triumph in his eyes. She rolled on her back and fired upward, the round catching him under the chin and snapping his head back. He collapsed on top of her, dead weight pinning her to the jungle floor. For a long moment, she could not move. The sky above her was turning gold with the rising sun, beautiful and indifferent to the violence below. She wondered if this was how her father had felt in his final moments, if he had looked up at some distant sky and made peace with what was coming. The dead man's blood was warm on her face. She pushed him off and forced herself to stand. 7 rounds. The enemy assault had fragmented. The survivors were no longer advancing in coordinated waves. They were hunting now, individual fighters stalking through the jungle, searching for the wounded shadow who had killed so many of their brothers. She could hear them calling to each other, their voices tight with fear and fury. She used the confusion to her advantage, slipping between positions, appearing where they least expected, striking and vanishing before they could respond. 3 more fell to her rifle in the span of 2 minutes. A 4th she took with her knife when he stumbled into her hiding place, the kill silent and intimate and terrible. 4 rounds. A voice cut through the chaos. Not on the radio this time. Close. Real. Enough. She spun toward the sound, rifle coming up. The collector stood 20 meters away, half hidden in the shadow of a massive tree. He was smaller than she had imagined, wiry and weathered, with the patient eyes of a predator who had learned to wait for his prey. A pistol hung loose in his right hand, pointed at the ground. "Your skills are everything the legends promised," he said. 15 of my men dead by your hand in the last hour alone. 23 total since dawn. You have earned my respect, La Sombra. She kept her rifle trained on his chest. Respect means nothing from a man like you. A man like me. He smiled thin and cold. You know nothing about me. Nothing about what I have built here. The Americans come to my country and play their war games, treating my people like pieces on a board. I merely collect the pieces they leave behind. You collect bodies. You collect trophies. You are a scavenger feeding on the dead. His smile faded. And what are you? A killer who pretends she is something more? A shadow who hides from the light because she cannot bear to see what she has become? The words hit harder than any bullet. She felt them burrow into the dark places inside her, the places where guilt and shame had taken root years ago. I know what I am, she said quietly. I have made peace with it. Have you? He took a step closer, the pistol still hanging at his side. I saw the reports from Helmand. The girl in the blue dress. You carry her with you, do you not? Every time you pull the trigger, you see her face. Her finger tightened on the trigger. You do not get to talk about her. Why not? She's the reason you are here. The reason you hid yourself away on a boat, ferrying men to their deaths while you pretended to be ordinary. You thought if you stopped killing, you could escape what you are. But you cannot escape La Sombra. The shadow follows wherever you go. He was close now. Too close. 10 meters and closing. I came here to add you to my collection, he said. The legendary sniper who does not exist. The ghost the Americans deny. You would have been my masterpiece. Would have been. He raised the pistol, and she saw his finger move toward the trigger. But some ghosts, he said, are better left to haunt the living. She fired first. The round took him in the center of his chest, punching through flesh and bone and heart. His pistol discharged into the dirt as he fell, the shot going wide by a meter. He hit the ground on his back, eyes still open, still watching her with something that might have been admiration. She walked to where he lay and looked down at him. Blood bubbled at his lips. His breath came in short, wet gasps. The girl in the blue dress, she said softly. Her name was Amira. She was 8 years old, and I think about her every single day. The collector's eyes flickered. His mouth moved, but no words came out. She knelt beside him, close enough to see the light fading from his gaze. That is the difference between us, she said. You collect the dead because they make you feel powerful. I carry them because they make me remember why I fight. Why killing has to mean something. Why every life matters, even the ones we take. His chest shuddered once, twice, then went still. She stayed there for a long moment, kneeling in the blood-soaked dirt beside the man who had hunted her for 6 years. The jungle was quiet around her. The shooting had stopped. The surviving fighters had melted away into the trees, their leader dead, their purpose dissolved. 3 rounds remaining. She rose to her feet, swaying slightly, and looked toward the river where the seals were making their escape. Time to go home. The jungle seemed different on the way down. The same trees that had hidden enemies now stood silent and watchful, their shadows no longer threatening. Birds were returning to the canopy, their calls echoing through the stillness like the first notes of a song she had forgotten. The world was remembering how to breathe, and so was she. She moved slowly, favoring her wounded arm, using the rifle as a makeshift crutch when the terrain grew steep. Every step sent fresh waves of pain through her body, but pain meant she was alive. Pain meant she had won. The radio on her hip had been silent since the collector fell. She did not know if the seals had made it to the river, did not know if Washington had survived the journey with his wounds, did not know anything except that she had done what she came to do, and now she needed to find her way home. The drainage culvert appeared through the trees, a shallow channel carved by decades of rain and runoff. She followed it downhill, letting gravity do the work her legs no longer could. The sound of running water grew louder, and she knew the river was close. She found them at the edge of the treeline. 6 figures huddled in the shadows where the jungle met the riverbank. Harwell stood watch at the perimeter, rifle raised, scanning the trees for threats. Makoa was helping Driscoll tend to Washington, who lay propped against a fallen log with fresh bandages wrapped around his midsection. The others were positioned in a loose defensive circle, wounded but ready. They heard her coming before they saw her. Harwell spun toward the sound, weapon trained on the vegetation, finger hovering near the trigger. She stepped out of the jungle with her hands visible, the M40 hanging loose at her side. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Makoa let out a sound that was half laugh and half sob. Holy hell! She made it! Harwell lowered his rifle slowly, his expression shifting through a dozen emotions she could not name. His eyes moved from her blood-soaked uniform to the wound on her arm to the exhaustion carved into every line of her face. Vega Castillo, he said. His voice cracked on her name. She tried to respond, but her legs chose that moment to give out. The ground rushed up to meet her, and she would have fallen face first into the dirt if Harwell had not caught her. His arms wrapped around her shoulders, holding her upright, keeping her from collapsing entirely. I got you, he said quietly. I got you. She leaned into him, too tired to pretend she did not need the support. The adrenaline that had kept her moving was draining away, leaving nothing but bone-deep weariness and the trembling aftermath of combat. The collector, she managed. He is dead. The words rippled through the group. She saw relief on some faces, disbelief on others. Makoa crossed himself, a gesture that seemed automatic rather than conscious. Harwell helped her to a sitting position against a tree, then knelt beside her to examine her wounded arm. The bandage she had applied was soaked through, the bleeding slow but persistent. Driscoll, he called. Get over here. The medic appeared at her side, her hands already moving with professional efficiency. The wound is deep, she said after a brief examination. Missed the bone, but you have lost a lot of blood. I can stabilize it, but you need a hospital. Add it to the list, Vega Castillo murmured. Washington's voice drifted over from his position against the log. Hey, boat driver. She turned her head to look at him. His face was pale and drawn, but his eyes were bright with something that looked like wonder. Thanks for the ride, he said. She almost laughed. It came out as a wet cough instead. Anytime. Harwell had not moved from her side. He was watching her with an expression she had never seen on his face before. Not respect exactly, though that was part of it. Something deeper. Something that acknowledged a debt that could never be fully repaid. 23, he said quietly. I counted the bodies on the ridge. 23 confirmed kills. In one morning. with a wounded arm and limited ammunition. She closed her eyes. 23 families who would never see their sons again. 23 mothers who would weep for children who had chosen the wrong side of a war they probably did not understand. She had stopped counting after the 7th. Some things were better left unmeasured. The radio on Harwell's vest crackled to life. Viking Element, this is Razor Flight. Philippine ground forces have secured the logging camp. Area is clear. Confirm your status and position for extraction. Harwell keyed his radio. Razor Flight, Viking Actual. We are at the river, approximately 2 kilometers northeast of the camp. 7 personnel, 3 wounded. Ready for extraction. Copy, Viking. We have rotary assets inbound. ETA, 15 minutes. Pop smoke when you have visual. Harwell acknowledged and clipped the radio back to his vest. He looked at Vega Castillo with something approaching a smile. 15 minutes, he said. Think you can hold on that long? She opened her eyes and met his gaze. I have held on this long, Senior Chief. 15 more minutes is nothing. He nodded slowly. Then his hand moved to his chest, and he did something she had never expected. He saluted, not the casual gesture of routine military courtesy. A real salute, crisp and formal, the kind reserved for officers and heroes and those who had earned something beyond rank. The others followed. Makoa first, then Driscoll, then the rest of the team. Even Washington, propped against his log with blood seeping through his bandages, raised his hand to his brow. She stared at them, these men who had dismissed her hours ago, who had looked past her like she was part of the furniture. Now, they were saluting her like she was someone who mattered. Her throat tightened. Her eyes burned. She lifted her good arm and returned the salute. The jungle held its breath around them, and for a single perfect moment, the war was over. The helicopters came in low over the river, their rotors beating the water in circular waves that spread outward like ripples from a stone. Harwell popped green smoke, and the lead aircraft banked toward their position, its crew chief already leaning out to assess the landing zone. She watched the approach through half-closed eyes, her back against the tree, her wounded arm cradled in a makeshift sling Driscoll had fashioned from a torn shirt. The adrenaline had faded completely now, leaving her hollow and shaking, a vessel emptied of everything except exhaustion. Makoa appeared at her side. Can you walk? She considered the question. Her legs felt like they belonged to someone else, distant and unreliable. But she had not come this far to be carried out. Help me up, she said. He took her good arm and lifted her to her feet with surprising gentleness. She swayed for a moment, the world tilting sideways, then steadied herself through sheer force of will. The first helicopter touched down on the riverbank, its skids sinking slightly into the soft earth. The crew chief jumped out and began directing the evacuation, his voice lost beneath the roar of the engines. Driscoll and another SEAL carried Washington toward the aircraft on an improvised stretcher. Harwell fell into step beside her as she limped toward the helicopter. He did not try to support her. He understood that she needed to make this last walk on her own feet. When we get back to base, he said, there's going to be a lot of paperwork. Reports, debriefs, people asking questions about what happened here. She nodded. She had been through this before, after other operations that had never officially occurred. The machinery of military bureaucracy, grinding away at the edges of truth until something acceptable emerged. I will handle the reports, Harwell continued. Make sure your name stays out of anything that might compromise your cover. As far as the official record is concerned, Viking Element was rescued by Philippine Quick Reaction Forces. No mention of a lone sniper on the ridge. She stopped walking and turned to look at him. His face was streaked with dirt and dried blood, his eyes red-rimmed with exhaustion. But beneath all of it, she saw something she had not expected. Sincerity. Why, she asked. Because you saved our lives, he said simply. And because some debts cannot be repaid with paperwork. He paused, his jaw tightening. And because I was wrong about you. Wrong in ways I am still trying to understand. The least I can do is protect what you have built. She studied him for a long moment. The arrogant operator who had dismissed her as a taxi driver was gone, replaced by something humbler, something human. I was not building anything, she said quietly. I was hiding. He shook his head. You were healing. There is a difference. The words settled into her chest like a stone dropped into still water. She had never thought of it that way. The 3 years of anonymity, the deliberate smallness, the careful erasure of everything that had made her La Sombra. She had called it cowardice. She had called it running away. Maybe it had been something else entirely. They reached the helicopter, and the crew chief extended a hand to help her aboard. She took it, letting him pull her into the aircraft's interior. The noise inside was deafening, but it was a good noise. The noise of rescue. The noise of survival. The other SEALs piled in around her, filling the remaining seats. Washington was strapped to a stretcher on the floor, Driscoll monitoring his vitals with quiet competence. Makoa settled into the seat beside her and gave her a small nod. Harwell was the last aboard. He took the seat across from her, his eyes meeting hers as the helicopter lifted off and banked toward the east. The jungle fell away beneath them, shrinking to a green carpet of endless vegetation. Somewhere down there, the collector's body lay cooling in the morning light. Somewhere down there, 23 other bodies marked the ridge where La Sombra had made her last stand. She looked away from the window. Driscoll leaned over from her position beside Washington. He is stable, she said, pitching her voice above the rotor noise. Lost a lot of blood, but he will make it. Good. The word came out as a whisper, lost in the noise. Driscoll hesitated, then added, for what it is worth, I have never seen anything like what you did today. I served with some of the best operators in the world, and none of them could have done what you did. She did not know how to respond to that. The legend of La Sombra had always felt like it belonged to someone else. A ghost story told in hushed tones. A myth that had nothing to do with the woman who just wanted to drive a boat and forget. But maybe the legend and the woman had always been the same person. Maybe she had been running from herself because she was afraid of what she might see if she ever stopped. The helicopter banked again, and through the window, she caught a glimpse of the ocean, blue and endless, stretching toward a horizon she could not see. What happens now? Makoa asked. He was looking at her with an expression that was part curiosity and part awe. For you, I mean, after all this. She thought about the question, thought about the boat waiting at the coastal hide, if it was even still there. Thought about the life she had built from anonymity and silence. Thought about the shadow she had buried and the woman who had emerged from the grave. I do not know, she said honestly. Harwell's voice cut through the noise. You could come back. To the teams. He leaned forward, his expression serious. I know people who could make it happen. With your skills, your experience, you would be an asset anywhere you wanted to go. She considered it. The idea of stepping back into the light, of being La Sombra again, but on her own terms this time, of using the skills she had spent 3 years denying. Maybe, she said, or maybe I finally stop running. Harwell nodded slowly. Either way, you have earned the choice. The helicopter thundered on toward base, carrying 7 survivors and 1 ghost who was finally ready to become human again. 3 weeks later, she stood on the dock at Naval Station San Diego, watching the sun sink toward the Pacific. Her arm was still in a sling, the wound healing slowly but cleanly. The doctors had told her she was lucky. Another inch to the left, and the round would have shattered bone, ended her career, maybe cost her the limb entirely. She had nodded and said nothing. Luck was a word people used when they did not understand the mathematics of survival. The debriefs had taken 9 days. 9 days of questions and reports and carefully worded statements that transformed the truth into something the official record could digest. The collectors' network had been dismantled. Philippine forces had raided 6 camps and arrested dozens of fighters. The intelligence value alone would keep analysts busy for months. Her name appeared nowhere in any of it. Harwell had kept his promise. As far as the Navy was concerned, Chief Petty Officer Marisol Vega Castillo had remained with her boat during the entire operation, exactly as ordered. The rescue of Viking Element was attributed to Philippine Quick Reaction Forces responding to an emergency beacon. a convenient fiction that protected everyone involved. She had not decided whether to be grateful or resentful. Footsteps on the dock behind her. She did not turn. She had heard him coming from 50 meters away, his gait distinctive even without visual confirmation. Harwell stopped beside her, his hands shoved into the pockets of his civilian jacket. He looked different out of uniform. Smaller somehow. More human. They released Washington this morning, he said. Full recovery. He is already talking about getting back to the teams. Good. She kept her eyes on the water. He is a good operator. He is alive because of you. They all are. She said nothing. The weight of 23 deaths still pressed against her chest, balanced against the 7 lives she had saved. The mathematics of war never came out even. There was always a remainder, a debt that could not be paid. Harwell shifted beside her, uncomfortable with the silence. Up on the paperwork, he said, the recommendation for the Silver Star. It will probably get buried somewhere, but I wanted you to know. She almost smiled. A medal for an operation that never happened, awarded to a sniper who did not exist. The irony was not lost on her. Thank you, she said, but that is not why I did it. I know. He paused, searching for words. That is what makes it matter. They stood together in silence, watching the light fade from the sky. Somewhere out in the harbor, a ship's horn sounded, low and mournful. I have been thinking about what you said, Harwell continued. About your father. About what he taught you. He turned to look at her profile. I had a mentor like that once. Master Chief who took me under his wing when I was a fresh operator who thought he knew everything. He used to say that the hardest part of this job was not the killing. It was remembering why we do it. She nodded slowly. Sounds like a wise man. He was. Harwell's voice softened. He died in Ramadi. 2006. IED took out his vehicle while he was evacuating wounded. He could have gotten clear, but he went back for a soldier who was trapped. Like father, like daughter, she murmured. Like all of us who choose this life. The sun touched the horizon, spreading gold and crimson across the water. She watched it sink, thinking about all the sunsets she had missed while hiding in the shadows. All the beauty she had denied herself because she was afraid of what the light might reveal. I'm not going back to the boat, she said. Harwell turned to face her fully. No, no. She finally looked at him, meeting his eyes with a steadiness she had not felt in years. You were right. I was healing, but I am done hiding from who I am. What does that mean? It means I am ready to be useful again. On my terms. She touched the dog tag beneath her shirt. My father gave his life holding a position so others could survive. I spent 3 years running from that legacy because I was afraid I was not worthy of it. But worthiness is not something you inherit. It is something you earn. Every day, every choice. Harwell studied her for a long moment. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I was hoping you would say something like that. He handed her the paper. Orders came through this morning. Seems someone at Warcom has been asking about a certain sniper with an unusual service record. They want to talk to you about a new program. Something off the books. She unfolded the paper and scanned its contents. The words were vague, bureaucratic, but the meaning was clear. An invitation. An opportunity. A door opening onto a future she had not allowed herself to imagine. No more boats, she asked. No more boats, he confirmed. Unless you want one. She folded the paper and slipped it into her pocket. The last light of the sun was fading now, the sky deepening from gold to purple to the first hints of night. Thank you, she said. For everything. Harwell shook his head. You saved my team. My brothers. There is no debt between us. Only respect. He extended his hand. She took it, feeling the calluses on his palm, the strength in his grip. Welcome back, La Sombra, he said quietly. She shook her head. That name belongs to someone else. Someone I used to be. Then who are you now? She released his hand and looked out at the darkening ocean. The question hung in the air between them, carrying the weight of everything she had been and everything she might become. I'm still figuring that out, she said. But I think that is the point. Footsteps on the dock. More than one set this time. She turned to see Makoa approaching, followed by Washington, his arm in a sling that matched her own. Behind them came Driscoll and the others from Viking Element, all of them in civilian clothes, all of them carrying something in their hands. Makoa reached her first. He was carrying a cooler and grinning like a kid on Christmas morning. "Senior Chief said you might be down here," he said. "Figure we would come say goodbye. Or hello, depending on what you decide." Washington stepped forward, moving carefully but steadily. He held out a bottle of Puerto Rican rum. The good kind, aged and expensive. "For the best taxi driver I ever had," he said. She took the bottle, feeling the unexpected sting of tears at the corners of her eyes. She had spent 3 years being invisible, 3 years being no one. And now these men, these warriors who had every reason to forget her, had come to find her. Driscoll set down a bag of ice. "Figure we could watch the sunset, if you're not too busy being mysterious." She laughed. The sound surprised her. It had been a long time since she had laughed like that. They gathered around her on the dock, passing the bottle, sharing stories, filling the silence with the easy camaraderie of people who had bled together. The stars came out one by one, and the harbor lights flickered on, and somewhere in the distance, a ship set sail for waters unknown. She sat among them, these men who had become her brothers, and felt something she had not felt in years. Home. If this story moved you, drop a comment about what resonated most. Maybe you know someone whose true abilities were hidden until the moment they were needed most. Share their story with us.